Hello, my name is Maria Groenewald. I'm the director of Voice, the leading network of humanitarian NGOs here in Brussels. And today I'm joined by Barry Andrews, member of the European Parliament and chair of the DEVA committee. Thank you for taking the time. I would like to ask your opinion about a campaign we are launching as Voice, a European-wide campaign to restore understanding and faith in humanitarian action. And this campaign has three core messages. First, humanitarian action is a lifeline. Second, every life has equal worth. And third, underfunding has real consequences. What message would you send to all the EU decision makers and the wider public on why humanitarian action works and why it must be protected and also properly resourced?
First of all, you're very welcome to the Parliament. Great to have you here. Secondly, I think what you're doing around this campaign is absolutely vital. I have constantly repeated the need for us to go back to the public to have a very frank conversation about the kind of work that you do, that your member organizations do, and the reasons you do it. And somehow or another, that discussion has been quite silent in recent times, and we really focused on other issues, which is fine. But when we forget about the core principles of humanitarian work, it comes at a cost in human lives. And by simply bringing that story back to the public, using all of our social media channels, using mainstream media, using critical influencers even, that's a really important exercise to do. So from my point of view, I'm really delighted that you're having this conversation at this time. I think the messages that are core to that are absolutely crucial at this time. I don't think there's a better time for us to be having this conversation, particularly at a European level. Some of your supporters will know that we're coming into a crucial budgetary negotiation throughout 2026, which will really determine the future of European support for humanitarian action.
Thank you. Thanks for the support. So now I have 5 questions for you around fragility, as we are publishing our Voice Out Loud on fragility. And the first one is the EU is preparing a new integrated approach to fragility at a time when multiple crises are deepening. From your perspective, if you could choose one thing, what should the EU do absolutely for communities living in fragile contexts to ensure they receive the attention, funding, and political commitment they need?
Well, I think the main thing that Europe can do is to provide a coordinated approach to this, because I think what we're seeing very often is only a humanitarian response or only a peace building response, and we're failing to really bring together in a coherent way all of the institutions of the European Union and all of the policy levers of the European Union. And when we fail to do that, I think we really are letting down the populations that we're committed to try to support. So when we come to these complicated scenarios, the one thing we can retain as a principle is coherence. Each geography is different, each context is different. There's lots of different reasons why fragility has come about. Some of it is very protracted, some of it is conflict related and recent. So we have to take different policy approaches in each different context. But that principle of the European Union acting in a concerted way and not in this fragmented way, I think is really, really crucial. So that's really what I'll be pushing at my level. Different actors in this space will have different priorities. But from my perspective, in the Development Committee of the European Parliament, I would like to see the different parts of the European Union working together around these responses.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. My second question, do you see growing pressure to redirect development resources away from fragile states towards short-term geopolitical or migration objectives? What are the risks of disengagement, and how can the next multi-annual financial framework protect long-term support to the people most affected by conflict and instability?
Well, look, when the new commission was formed in 2024, it was clearly an acknowledgement by President von der Leyen that a differentiated approach was required. And now we're coming to that policy document that we're all very interested to see the outcome of. But what that is pushing against is a very clear redefinition of our external action, essentially as a union. And rather than being focused primarily on development policy objectives, it seems to be more influenced now by geopolitical factors, including European competitiveness. So the question for us, for those of us who support humanitarian action, for those of us who are concerned about fragility, is really how do we redefine our arguments and how do we frame our arguments? I'm quite comfortable with the idea of enlightened self-interest. It's something I've been talking about for 20 years, frankly. So we still retain the primary purpose, which is to save lives. But we also recognize that there can be secondary purposes that benefit the union, whether it is competitiveness, whether it is the security agenda that people are very, very concerned about, or even whether it's about irregular population movement. We can frame our arguments in those contexts, not because we think they're the primary reason for them, but that they are part of that secondary consequences. So I think we have to be in those conversations, and I think that will help us to gain traction in the decision among the decision makers and in the crucial period ahead over the next few months.
Thanks a lot. My third question, forced displacement is rising in fragile settings. How should the EU adjust its policies to address the root causes of displacement and strengthen protection and resilience in crisis-affected countries? What would be the most important thing to do?
Well, I think what we have to do is make sure that we retain our commitment to the Green Deal, that we remain absolutely determined on our climate objectives. I think when we turn our back on that, we know that a lot of displacement has been caused by climate, but also by conflict as well. These are the two main drivers of displacement. So I think we really have to focus on these two things. And as I mentioned before, this is really about a coherent approach across development, humanitarian and peace interventions. And that's something that I don't think we've been very, very good at, frankly. So I think that has to improve. I think we have to retain our commitment towards our climate policy objectives, but also we have to look at the human implications of irregular population movement and not just look at it from a security point of view, which is currently the way it's been looked at. So we often look at these things in terms of figures and numbers and how many people have moved. But if we look at the human aspect of it, which is really how it's impacting people's lives, how people are missing all of their growth milestones, particularly younger people, I think it really resonates more with the population and with policy decision makers. So I think that's the crucial framing of it. That is part of the way we need to approach this issue.
I very much agree. My number 4, in many contexts, such as Myanmar, Sudan, and other countries, NGOs, including also our voice members, face shrinking civic space and growing operational risks. How can the EU maintain principled and sustained engagement in these environments while ensuring that partners can operate safely and effectively?
Well, I think there's two things here. I think this is an area where there's going to be a fight here in the European institutions over the protection of funding for civil society actors, both in the European Union, but also in our partner developing countries and our humanitarian contexts. There is a pushback against civil society space. There's no question or doubt about that. It's a global phenomenon. So the European Union as a principled actor in this space has a crucial role to play. And the negotiations that we're currently having over the Global Europe Instrument is going to be really central. So there are going to be tough negotiations in the next while. Do I think that there's a majority to defend principled funding for civil society action? I'm not sure. Either at council level or parliament level. The current proposal, in my view, doesn't go far enough to protect civil society actors. I don't think the ring fencing of that funding is clear. So we will have to make our arguments. And again, it's connected with your own initiatives around making sure that we win the argument, that we prepare a narrative, that we have the correct framing that really influences decision makers.
Thank you. And indeed, we should probably extend our campaign on the importance of a lively civil society for a functioning democracy, no matter the cause the NGOs are fighting for. Coming to my last question, looking ahead, what role do you see for the European Parliament in safeguarding EU engagement in fragile contexts, and how can MEPs, you and others, contribute to more coherent humanitarian development peace nexus, including the climate aspect, in practice also?
Yeah, well, I think there's two main things that the Parliament can do in the next while. One is obviously the negotiations around the Global Europe instrument as part of the MFF. As an Irish MEP, I consider it fortuitous that Ireland will have the presidency in the second half of 2026, and so that the final negotiations around the MFF will be during the Irish presidency. And I think that Ireland has a very principled approach to fragility, very conscious of it as a central priority. So I think that's good. I think the other issue we'll be looking at, of course, is the communication coming from DG ECHO. This is a priority for my committee, the Development Committee, that this contains a lot of the things that we are very concerned about. So, for example, just to give an example, is around international humanitarian law. Currently, I'm very concerned about it. I think it's been eroded. I think it's been degraded. I don't think the European Union has shown the best leadership in this area. So what I'd like to see is a restatement of basic principles so that we can build the process of restoring public faith in international humanitarian law, that it's relevant, that it can protect humanitarian workers, and that we can ensure that there is public support for humanitarian intervention, both in the context in which this work is carried out, but also importantly in Europe.
Thank you. As Voice, we couldn't agree more about the importance of respecting and recalling respect for IHL and humanitarian principles. So we're very much aligned on this fight. And I thank you very much for your support as the chair of the DEVA committee in your work as an MEP. We look forward to the Irish presidency. We're accompanying also the process of the upcoming humanitarian communication. Voice will publish its position paper soon. And of course, a big thank you today for taking the time here at the European Parliament.
My pleasure, Maria. Thanks for coming into the Parliament.
Thank you.